I'm pleased to welcome my guest today. In an interesting twist of fate, her life journey eventually brought her to Wilmot Township. She jumped right into the community as a volunteer in many ways. After a time, she decided to run, and she ran for office in 2014. Unfortunately, she lost in a nail biter, only 11 votes. However, that didn't deter her, and she ran again in 2018. And in another interesting twist of fate, this time she was elected, or actually acclaimed. She found herself in the center of the community during some very challenging times. She's here to tell us about her journey as a community volunteer and elected politician. I'm pleased to welcome to the Old Grey Mares podcast, Cheryl Gordijk. Cheryl, did I get that right?
You did. Thank you.
Okay, great. So you and I first met in 2018 when I was running I was running for regional chair, and I was hosting a public meeting at the Wilmot Rec Center, and you had come out. I'm not sure if Nigel was out that night as well, but I know you were out, so I remember meeting you at that, and remember you telling me that you were acclaimed. But it was great to see that you were out because, as I recall, you said you wanted to stay active in getting out to meet people and hearing from the constituents, right?
Yes, correct. It was important, I think, to kind of keep that open communication. Just because I was acclaimed, it was still. There was I think another 3 or 4 months. I think the acclamation date was in July, and the election wasn't until the fall. So it was still good you needed to be out there, I think.
A good way to introduce yourself to everybody too, right?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Because when you run, I mean, when you first run, people will know you or of you, but not everybody knows you or of you. And so it's always interesting. I always think about elections. It's the only time where you can walk up to strangers' doors, knock on the door, and it's not like anyone thinks you're trespassing or something, right? You have an opportunity to say hi. But before we get into your time in office, I just want to talk about the volunteer work, but you're a Kitchener girl, right? I mean, you were born in Kitchener.
I was born in Toronto.
Right.
Yeah, and moved to Kitchener in 1975, June the 21st.
All right, and then so was it for high school or you?
Yeah, I got there. Well, my first education in Kitchener was through high school. I went to Forest Heights for 2 years and Cameron Heights for 2 years.
Okay, and how did you enjoy your Kitchener experiences?
It was different. I didn't spend a lot of time. I was fortunate enough that my parents let me have some freedom, and I pretty much every other weekend I was back in Toronto visiting my friends. Yeah. I did that probably for a little over 2 years until I met my first husband, and then I decided to stay in Kitchener a little bit more often. But I missed my lifestyle in Toronto because for me, it was a little bit more different in Kitchener than it was in Toronto. I wasn't used to that. I just wasn't used to the lifestyle here at the time.
No, for sure. There's way more happening in Toronto in terms of whatever sports, entertainment, concerts, plays, whatever. There's a wide variety of cultural experiences too, right? I mean,
exactly.
In Toronto. So yeah, no, totally understand. I mean, I got 2 of my daughters are living in Toronto now. We couldn't keep them in air. So
no, and it's weird because you get used to some of the things like the path. You kind of got used to being on the path. You got used to being down on the Queen's Quay, going up and down Yonge Street, shopping to all the kind of cool, funky boutiques and stuff. I was kind of a semi-regular at Sam the Record Man because that was when you still could buy 45s. And down there with my, weekly allowance and stuff, going down there getting my 45s. And occasionally, if I got lots of birthday money, I'd be at Master John's getting a really cool pair of shoes or boots or some kind. Yeah,
Master John's, I'm not familiar with, but Sam
I think they were famous because Kiss made their boots. It's their claim to fame, but they were well known in sort of, that kind of.
Did you have some real platform kind of boots?
Well, it was that time of, right? The 70s with the boots. I mean, platform running shoes, which are now coming back again, all those kind of fun things. Yeah.
So in Kitchener though, so you met your first husband, you're in Kitchener. Yeah. And you get involved in various community activities when you're in Kitchener, right?
A little bit, not as much because of, married and I had a baby right away. a year after we were married, I had my first daughter, or my only daughter, and then went to work. But through work, did things. I worked, one of my first jobs was like at Canada Trust when she was little, and I was on the staff association. So I helped with various other members of the staff association planning events throughout the Canada Trust community. Coincidentally enough, we used to come out to Wilmot regularly because they used to have a cottage on Sunfish Lake that was at one time donated to Canada Trust through, I'm not quite sure, some sort of trust thing. And we had a lot of events out on Sunfish Lake. So before I even knew about Wilmot, I was always coming out here for the events that we had. And then when my marriage didn't survive, I started volunteering at my daughter's school and other events. And one of the places I volunteered with first was with KW sexual assault.
Nice. And what school was your daughter at the time?
She did a couple. I can't remember. I was trying to remember the name of it. I think it wasn't St. Joseph's. It was the school on Joseph Street that's now a co-op housing and a medical center.
Right. Close to Victoria Park, right?
Correct. And she started there and they closed it. And then we got her to a couple other schools in the community, King Edward. And
yes, Girl Classic. Yeah. That's funny you mention that, because for a brief time before I moved out to Ayr, I lived not too far from St. Joseph's on Cortland, so the other side of St. Joseph, and we used to attend the St. Joseph's. So yeah, interesting.
And that's over in Cherry Park, right?
Actually, this is on Cortland near Cedar.
Right.
Yeah, over there.
Yeah.
So, and also, you also volunteered with some Terry Fox run stuff in Kitchener too?
through the schools again, before I even knew that I was going to be so heavily involved with the foundation later in life. I did the school runs with my daughter annually, like they did with all of the schools, and then till she got to high school, and then she kind of got a bit bored with doing those kind of things with her mom.
Of course.
So as they do.
I had that times 3, so yeah, I know what you mean. So eventually you met Nigel.
Yep.
And that was sort of a serendipitous
it
meeting,
really
right?
was. I'll try and make it really brief, but so he's my husband, is my brother-in-law's first cousin, and he had come over for a family visit to visit his aunt and uncle, which are my brother-in-law's parents. And they had connected with my sister, my future aunt and uncle-in-law, and asked if we could entertain Nigel when he was coming to visit, because they were a little in their elderly side, and nighttime activities. And he's from London, so they didn't know what to expect from a London, UK boy. And anyway, I offered to take him out one night, and lo and behold, London UK guy doesn't go to clubs, which I thought was a bit strange.
That was your plan, was to take him to a club, right?
Yeah, I was taking him to the club. And kind of like, I make it sort of sound funny, but it was really, I just kind of thought, I don't know this guy, so I'll take him to a nightclub and kind of, I wouldn't say dump him, but like if he happened to meet some people and he had a couple of drinks, then I was doing what my aunt and uncle asked me to do, kind of thing. And he doesn't drink and he doesn't dance. And so we ended up going to Williams and had a lovely coffee and some dessert. It was when it just first opened up. I think probably within a year it had opened up in the City Hall.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yep. Right.
Yeah. And then we just kind of connected and started becoming pen pals. And we met in September of 96 and we were married in July of 97.
Yada, married in July of 97. Yeah. So that took you abroad, right?
Yep. We had made the decision at that time. Nigel was adamant that he didn't want to be in Canada. The cold, I think, had scared him because he would fly over to visit while we were making arrangements for the wedding and things like that. And he had his first experience with like 6-foot high snow. That first winter of 96 was brutal. That he had experienced. We've had others similar, but at that time he had never experienced anything like that before. Right. And so he was like, yeah, no, I'm not moving to Canada.
So every stereotype of Canada was just brought to bear. Yeah.
Yeah. He really did not have any, we have pictures of him like with like shovels, and it was like up past his, like almost past his waist. He was not a happy camper. So yeah, we decided to make the move, took my daughter with us, and we moved to the United Kingdom, and did 2 years in London, in the north part of London, which was where Nigel was from. He was from North Finchley. So an Arsenal boy, born and bred.
Yes, he's an Arsenal football fan.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, definitely. Then we moved to Brighton and did almost 8 years there. And our granddaughter was born in the UK. And she decided, my daughter and my granddaughter moved back to Canada, and we were missing them desperately. So we made the decision to move. And so Nigel started the process of becoming a permanent resident.
Yeah.
And I moved back home late 2006. He moved over by the time all the paperwork was in 2017, 2008.
Did you move to Kitchener?
2007.
Sorry, did you move to Kitchener first, or
we had an apartment there that we rented while we were looking. So we did one of those sort of pre-Airbnb kind of things, but we did one of those rentals because we didn't really have any place to stay. None of our family had the space, right? For bedrooms and furniture and all those kind of things, because we were shipping some of our stuff home. So we ended up doing an exclusive, or what do they call an exclusive rental at one of those places. So we weren't long term. And then we just looked and looked and looked. And within a couple of months, I found a place in New Hamburg. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you had some connections with people in New Hamburg too, right?
Only after we got there, we made those connections. Yeah. So Nigel, when he found out we were moving, connected with a couple of individuals, one being Paul Knowles, who was the president of the Board of Trade at the time. And Nigel started connecting to people and offered to do some website design for a couple of organizations. One of the first ones he did, which he did for a donation, was to the New Hamburg Firebirds. Just to kind of get his name out there, get connected to the community. That's the hockey
team, right? That's the hockey team, the Junior C hockey team, yeah.
Yeah. So he did that.
First off, before we go too far, though, I just want to say you came back to Canada was for the love of a grandbaby, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So she's 18 now. So she is quite an amazing girl. We love our Maddie. She's the love of our life. Nigel was very, it was interesting because one of the bonuses of us was that we had gotten to a point in our lives where children weren't really, a thing. He wasn't really into having any children and had been a single man. And my daughter was at a point where I'm like, I'm not having any more babies. So it was kind of a bonus. But the day that Maddie was born, Nigel was the first one to hold her. And that was kind of, as they say, the end of it. Yeah, he had found the light.
Part of his heart was taken.
Oh, big time. Yeah.
So it was through your connection with Paul Knowles and his wife, Nancy, right? That
correct. Yeah.
Drew you into becoming more active within the New Hamburg Wilmot community.
Yeah. Nigel, when he got on the Board of Trade, he figured that would be the best thing for him, at least. I sort of was I had always kind of volunteered, but I didn't know where to start with being in a new place. And it had been a few years from being in Canada. So when we met Nancy, she was a go-getter like crazy. She kind of reminds me a bit of what Angie Hallman might have been.
We just talked to Angie. I understand what you mean.
Yeah, she's like, it's never ending. And so one of the first things I met Nancy, I met them at their wedding. Paul and Nancy was the first time they got married. They got married, and for the first time I met Nancy. Right. And she pulled me aside and she said, "Oh, you're just the person I'm looking for," kind of thing. And we ended up doing the Santa Claus Parade together. We did New Hamburg's 150th celebration and organized all of that, and had a parade organized. And then from there, just everything took off. From Dickens at her church, because she was the minister at the Zion United in New Hamburg.
Oh, so, Nancy was the minister?
Yes, she was.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So she's now in Fullerton, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
So did your, we'll talk a little bit more about the volunteer activities, but in these, just you brought up Angie Hallman's name. Did you guys cross paths together in some of these volunteer activities?
Some of them, but the big one that we kind of really crossed paths was with her on the splash pad. And just kind of being connected that way. And then through the New Hamburg, the William Scott Festival. Prior to that, it was the New Hamburger Festival. So there was a few things throughout Canada Day events. I was on the Canada Day committee prior to her taking it over, and did that for about 5 or 6 years with another woman named Tina in New Hamburg. And then when Tina was finished, she handed Canada Day off to Angie, and Angie and her family became the committee. Right. For that festival. And then we came on board helping with her. And mostly though for the Terry Fox stuff that we were doing within the community.
And that's the big one for you, Nige. I know that, and I see that on social media. The work you guys do is phenomenal for the size of the community, and what you're able to accomplish is huge. But I don't know if you mentioned New Hamburg Live. I don't know if you said that or not. So why don't you talk about New Hamburg Live? That was a really cool. That was a really cool thing that Paul and Nancy and also Vicky Saint Pierre and Aaron. Oh, I'm sorry, Aaron. Your last name escapes me right now, but they were involved with, and John and Anina Hansen. So I have to let them know as well, because they were big contributors to it. So Paul and Nancy had musical connections and theater connections, either through Stratford and Niagara-on-the-Lake festivals. Nancy being a professional music promoter, and Vicky is a professional opera singer, plays throughout the world or sings throughout the world. In fact, I think she has done Carnegie Hall. So she was quite a talented woman. Wow. And they decided to do this event because they felt that something was missing because of the price point of having to go to Toronto to see people of Vicky's caliber and others. And so it was a festival to kind of keep the ticket price for around $20, $25, depending on the event. And it included everything from an art installation to musical events to small drama performances, as well as book readings. And we did it for about 6 years. It was all around about the end of May to the first week of June. So it was a whole week just coming into New Hamburg and participating and seeing some of the events. We had some amazing, like Ashley McIsaac came. Yeah. Sylvia Tyson and her quartet, the Good Lovelies. I'm going to forget a whole pile of people, but it was just amazing. But I get the general idea. Like to bring that sort of entertainment talent to the community is a phenomenal opportunity that people generally won't have that opportunity to get out to see. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And we most of the events were held at the Steinman Mennonite Church. They had just finished their major renovation, so they had a great sound system. And then some of the events were held at the New Hamburg Community Center. So the gala night was held there. So it was very cool. We had a silent auction and some really great artists. So it was a wonderful event. Yeah. Did it continue, or it stopped because of volunteers? No, it only lasted for about 6 years because, like everything else, cost of living. And while it was, the artists were all, one of the things that Nancy and Paul were proud of, being the main organizers and their connections, is that they paid the artists. Nobody was doing it for free. Yeah. But you can't sustain some of the artists for like $200, right? Like they were just getting kind of like the bare minimum, and eventually ticket prices had to go up, and then that kind of went against the whole ethos of the program, right? Yeah. So they just made a decision that it wasn't going to be financially wasn't going to be viable anymore. So it was finished. Yeah. Unfortunately finished, but it was great. It was too successful. It was drawing pretty much major talent. It was going to be too expensive. It was really quite a lovely event. My mother-in-law, before she passed, she looked so forward to going. She got to go for 3 of the years, I think, before she passed. And she so much enjoyed it. And it was quite funny because Ashley McIsaac came out to talk to her, and neither one of them could understand each other because she had a very distinct accent, my mother-in-law. Right. Being from Guyana. Yes. And Ashley's accent was not really easy to understand either. Because he's from Eastern Canada, right? Yeah. So she just nodded her head a lot while we talked to her. So it was kind of funny watching the two of them interact. Did he have his kilt on? He did. Yeah, he did. Hopefully nothing shocking. I don't think so. I have a note here about 2008 flood relief. And so again, through Paul and Nancy and a few other people, Nigel and I, and Paul and Nancy and
and a couple others organized a fundraiser throughout the community to raise some funds for people that were affected by one of the major floods that happened in New Hamburg. The biggest one for us that we had experienced at that time was in 2008.
Yeah.
And we raised, I believe, a little over $60,000 or $70,000. It wasn't going to fix anybody's home. It wasn't, but it was for some of the food that some of the people had lost. You know, that kind of thing. But yeah, so it was quite,
you know what, really, something like that also lets people know who have been impacted that others care, right? That's a big message that, you know, we always talk about small town and coming together. And that's an example of what happens in those situations. And that really helps uplift people, even though it's not going to solve all your problems. As you said, it goes a long way on the emotional side for sure. Yes. So, Terry Fox, we'll just touch on that before we get into the election. So Terry Fox, for you guys, I mean, when did you first start doing Terry Fox or getting involved with Terry Fox?
The first one, because I was doing other things. Like we've always been able to, I think, because of the way that we came into our relationship, there was, I'd always been very independent because I'd been on my own for almost 8 years before I met him. So when I came here, I had gotten myself involved in little things because of our granddaughter before Nigel officially moved over. So anyway, that being said, is he actually had decided to do the Terry Fox run with the previous organizer, and he ran it the 1 year just for fun. And then the organizer, Sam Miller, said, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And anyway, Nigel said, oh, maybe I could do it. And so he decided that he would follow him for the 1 year and then take it over kind of thing. Did that. And we just did the run and left everything the same, like didn't change anything, just did the run. And then just kind of from that first run, then slowly started changing things up. But the biggest change for us was when we changed it from the New Hamburg Terry Fox to the Wilmot Terry Fox. And again, that sense of community and the sense of being heard was, we had heard that through the community. It's like, oh, I didn't think I could come because it's called New Hamburg. Oh. So people from St. Agatha, from Foxborough Green, the Baden, all of those people just assumed that they couldn't participate. I'm not sure as to why, because it's, you know, it's like cancer runs all over the world. They kind of just, people go, but for some reason they just felt.
Yeah, it didn't speak to them. For on whatever level. But so you kind of fixed that with this tweak.
Yeah, we just made it Wilmot Terry Fox. And then all of a sudden our numbers went up, our participation went up, our volunteers went up. But Nigel and I had been able to, we just kept the volunteers really minimum. It would have been nice to sort of have committees like some of the bigger runs do, like Kitchener and Waterloo, and of course Toronto. But we found it worked for us just to kind of keep it for us, for the two of us to do it, and then ask for help. Because then people, again, the other thing for us is we felt that people then weren't feeling that they had to be committed. Like it was for some people, volunteer becomes this chain on their neck, right?
Well, and it's a big thing. I mean, you can donate money to an organization, fine, but they also need people to do the work. And especially when you're doing volunteer, I always tell people, you got to approach it from the concept of it's a marathon, not a sprint. Because then you get burnt out. But if you're casual, involved, as you wish, at your pace, works a lot better. And you guys also did the music events throughout the year as well in support of Terry Fox.
That was where Nigel where his skill set is his social media skills and some of the way that he can do those asks really well. And we started off with small things. We'd go out to the business and say, hey, what do you think you could do to help us? And so Meredith, for example, from Mimi's Cafe, did like Terry Fox shoes. She made little cookies that looked like his Adidas shoes. They were blue. So she did a couple of years of the cookies. Pizza. One of our local pizza places did great Canadian pizza. So Canadian pizza. For a great Canadian. And so on that day in April 12th, he did pizza. Then we did coffee days. And then we did the musical events, which were just amazing. Again, we have so many. Kitchener-Waterloo, especially in Wilmot too, it amazes me the level of talent,
Right.
music as well as visual artists that we have. I think one of our most successful things besides the music festivals was we did something called Chairs of Hope. And we were very fortunate to have what we called patrons of the arts. So we asked some patrons within the community to donate some money, and we were able to buy Muskoka chairs. And then from some of the money that they donated, we bought the chairs. And then we also contributed a little bit to the artists for their paint. And we had 12 Muskoka chairs painted up by individual artists. And they were just phenomenal. Some of them just were amazing. I just can't, they're just beautiful. They're literally pieces of art that you don't want to sit on.
That's fantastic. And so this volunteer work you're doing, there is eventually overlap with your time on council.
Correct.
But let's shift now and talk about your focus shift. So now you're working in the community. You're doing various things, like you mentioned the spray pad with Angie. So you would have seen from that perspective the interaction, such as it was with staff and council, and you know, and no doubt have a particular view about that. And I think that kind of leads into your general view about why you ran. So why is it in 2014 you decided you wanted to run for council?
I had been volunteering at some of the events in St. Agatha and had made a connection with a really amazing couple, Alan and Ann Fisher. And Alan, I don't know, he took me under his wing and said, you know, I really appreciate all the work that you're doing. I like that you're active in our community. And then he said to me, I would love for you to be our counselor here. The community felt they needed somebody to represent them better than what was being done. But
tell me about that though. What was the perception? Like, what were the issues? Communication.
The lack of communication, I think, and just kind of knowing what was going on. They had reached out to me because of my work at the New Hamburg Board of Trade for a couple of issues, and had said, you know, could you help us? And so I just made a couple of phone calls on Al's behalf and a couple other people in the community, just through my connections with the Board of Trade. And they just went, this is more than we've ever gotten for the last 8 years from our current council. So thank you. And then they said, why don't you run for council? And I kind of went, I don't know. Like, that just seems like a lot of, I don't know. And, you know, the usual kind of, what would I do? How do I do it? There really isn't any, there's not really education for it kind of thing. You're kind of thrown into something.
That part I get you, but I just want to go back to the why first, okay? Because you got to have a real why. So was it the communication issue? You know, I had a note down here about roadblocks with township tables not being replaced. I was trying to remember what that was about. What was that?
So again, through the New Hamburg Live, one of the things that we had is that there was issues of working with township staff, that things weren't being done as well as I think that they could have been done, or that they had been, because I don't want to take it on to the staff level. I think it actually came from certain individuals.
Let's just say overall township. We won't get into the nitty gritty, but just the overall township response.
The response from the township, and I don't want to slag off some of the actual great workers that are there. That's all.
We all agree. Yeah. We all agree. Yeah. But there is instances where some things happen, and that's what I'm trying to get at. What was the things that was happening? Yeah,
and so things like the tables were damaged, and when we were doing the New Hamburg Live, for example, we would have people that would get hurt because the tables were so damaged that they had the hard plastic would actually cut people because there were holes in the plastic, mold in the kitchen not being clean because they wouldn't clean it at the community center. So those kind of things. And so then on top of the phone calls that I would make for individuals, Al and Ann just kind of said, we could use your voice. And then I went and talked to somebody else and they said, go for it. So I hadn't had a chance to actually talk to Nige at first. It was just really that sort of feeling that more could be done, even if it was just small changes.
And that's what you were picking up from your conversations with other people, that they were also feeling this lack of response, lack of connection between what was going on in the township and the township itself.
Yeah, and I think for St. Agatha, I call it St. Agatha, but Ward 2, because it's it's a massive ward.
Yeah.
I think that they felt, because of their numbers, like when you take into account how many people live in Wilmot.
Right, how small it is versus New Hamburg-Baden, yeah.
Yeah, I think that their perception was, because you always want to sort of, not everybody, some people get an answer and not everybody does, but their perception as a whole was that they were an afterthought. So when it came to things like spending money at the community center in St. Agatha, they were an afterthought, because budget-wise, you only have so many dollars, and so there's not that many people in St. Agatha, so you don't care.
And that's a good point from a rural township versus an urban city municipality, right? The two municipalities. Yeah. While within the city, you're going to get sometimes that suburban, downtown or uptown debate. Where are you spending the money? In the townships, you get that, there's always a couple of large centers, like in North Dumfries was Ayr. Yeah. And then you would have Branston and Clyde, which were the other side of the township and really had more connection to Cambridge than they did coming over to Ayr. But you're trying to figure out, what can I do to reach out to those areas so that they feel connected to what's going on at the township?
Correct. It's a really hard one, because this is my feeling. It's because it's so spread out, and a lot of them are farmers, and farmers have an important job, as we all know. Especially, we found out during the pandemic, the whole food scarcity thing. Yeah. But the idea being is that they're insular in what their issues are, and as long as they can do their job, like be farmers, there's very little that impacts them to a certain extent. But one of the biggest impacts, of course, was drainage. So one of the people that I had reached out to was like, he reached out to me. He said, like, you need to help me with my drains. I'm getting a roadblock at the township. So I made the first phone calls. And I didn't do anything. It just felt like I did something, right? Like just making that first phone call. But
you didn't think it was a whole lot, but they thought, oh my God, this is fantastic.
But again, it was just the idea is that I actually did it. Whereas their conversations with me were that at least you made the phone call.
Right.
It wasn't being done before.
Yes.
And again, because you only have approximately, 2,500 people, it's, part of our job as counselors is for the greater good. So sometimes the decisions that you make, well, I may not be happy with all of them that I made.
Right.
Financially and ethically, they were the right ones to do. But would I love to have been able to say, wow, could we have done something better at St. Agatha, or could we have done something more in Lisbon to help with traffic calming? Like those kind of concerns are always there. But we only have so many dollars. We only have so many staff. And so it's the greater good, which unfortunately sometimes means that my ward as well as Angie's ward kind of get left at the bottom of the barrel. Well,
it feels like it. And that's an interesting point, because I know whenever I would chat with Mayor Doug Craig when he was mayor of Cambridge, and he would do a state of the city or what have you, I don't know if he always brought this up, but I know he always made sure he had the stats that showed how much was spent per capita in Hespeler, Preston, and Galt, because there was always a perception that Galt got most of the attention because that's where the city hall was, et cetera, et cetera. So that was always important to show that the love is getting spread around as equally as possible, but sometimes it's hard to see that.
Well, and I think with our township, and we never asked for that, and that might be a great thing to sort of go forward with. I don't know if we were able to actually do that because of there isn't any specific town center, so to speak. There isn't a community center in Lisbon. There's only the one in St. Agatha and New Dundee. But what about Mannheim? There is one in Mannheim, but my ward only had one, right? Yeah. And so people from Lisbon didn't come out really that far to St. Agatha. If they were going to go somewhere, they probably went to Wellesley.
Yeah, and your ward was predominantly rural, as you said, farming. And I remember the only issue with me when I was running, I went out to meet one farm family. I just wanted to make sure their taxes weren't going to go way up if I was elected. But farms already pay I think it's 25% or some fraction lower than the rural,
which is
urban.
where the gas tax comes in, right? That unfortunately, well, that was one of our biggest issues when we were running, but we'll get into that later. was the gas
Okay.
tax.
So
Yes.
let's talk about the 2014 race then.
Yep.
So you're up against, you file and
Yep.
you're up and against an incumbent, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Was it just the two of you in the race?
Just the two of us. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
It was a really strange one. I think at like 1:45, the day of the last, is when I made my decision. Like, I got to the township office like at the last possible minute, and that was prior to us having to have the 25 signatures. So it was really easy.
well, I think you told the story. Some friend like basically drove you there to get registered, right?
Correct. Yeah.
15 minutes before. Yeah.
Yeah, we just went in and filed. And then when I got out, because it just happened, like, I happened to go into a friend's store in New Hamburg, and we were having a conversation, and I just jokingly said, Anne and Al want me to run. And they said, go for it. And I went, oh, I don't know. And they want to just go for it. And they grabbed me and we went. I signed up. And then I called Nige. So it was the weirdest thing. Like, I had no time. He didn't even know. It was done. Now, that being said, he knew I had an inkling, because I had been attending the women's.
I was going to ask you, did you attend?
Yes.
You and Angie both attended that school, right?
I had attended them before the two girls did, like, because Jen went as well. But
right, because Angie would have been
them,
after. Yeah.
correct. And I'd attended them previously. I think that was this last election in 2022. I think that was my fourth time going to them.
Okay, so you would have been 10, 14, 18, and 22.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the very first ones, the one that Jane Mitchell, right?
Yeah.
So I think I did the very first one. And then, and it wasn't quite, I think, as extensive as they became, which was amazing. But it was still an interesting learning curve, right? Like, to kind of get some of
you determine how to run a campaign?
Correct, for sure. Definitely.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how was that first campaign? You had a website, no doubt.
No, I thought it was I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was really great to it was amazing to have the support I had from the people that, again, going back to Anne and Al, the sort of mayor of St. Agatha at the time. Al's family had run the Esso station in St. Agatha. It has just recently closed, but it was open for 60 years through his family. His dad opened it and started it. So it was amazing to have the support, because then Al would call me up and say, I've got about 5 or 6 people here at the gas station. Can you come and have a coffee time?
You called him, you call him the mayor of St. Agatha, right?
Yeah, that was, everybody told me he was, because that was where you went to. It was for the 60 years that place was there. I mean, there was parties that were had there in the back. There was the St. Agatha Community Center. The impetus to sort of build it and make it came from the families from that community, and Fisher's being one of them, the Hades being another one. Their families built that community center. And then prior to when the parks took over and it became part of the provincial / municipal buildings, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you're running the campaign, you're knocking on all the doors.
Yep.
Getting the
I
signs
did all
up.
of the doors. Yep. Did all the doors. And I may not have actually physically seen everybody at the doors, just based on, again, the rural community. So a lot of the farmers wouldn't have been available, and it was fall, because the last day, I think, for the election was in September that year. And so I wasn't going to meet everybody physically, but I made it to every door, at least with literature, and those that I was able to see, I talked to. Yeah. So it was really great to get out there and meet and hear what people's thoughts were. But again, it was interesting in that, especially with the farmers I was able to connect with, is like, yep, we're good. We just want to make sure, that our taxes, like you said, their taxes don't go up.
Yeah.
And,
But so election night, you lost by 11. I guess it got even closer than that at times. Like it was a bit of a nail biter. It was
going to. Yeah, I think the numbers were going up and down, but eventually at the end of it, it was 11 votes. Yeah, yeah.
So obviously that experience didn't turn you off from running again.
No.
Did you know you were always going to run again, or that kind of evolved as well?
I think in the back of my mind, it was kind of there that I would run again. But there's a little bit of hesitation, partly because I think, without sounding overly negative, I wasn't seeing anything change. So you kind of wonder what would be the point. The council that was there before I won or was acclaimed
Yeah.
It still felt like the
Same
community
old.
wasn't being, well, it just felt like the community wasn't being represented, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, or at least listened to.
Yeah.
There was one meeting in particular where I'm not going to name names, but it was just, there was a resident that came to discuss a really important issue.
Yes.
And the mayor, as well as one of the staff member, actually said to the resident in public to tell him they actually said to him, sit down and shut up. You're not welcome here.
Whoa.
So it was that kind of reaction to speaking to a resident who was voicing safety concerns within his community really hit home for me. And it stuck with me as to this is not the way it should be. So in one way, I was excited to be able to make a change, but I didn't know if I could make the change if it was the same individuals that were sitting in that horseshoe. Because I didn't know, you didn't know what was making that disrespect for the residents there. Where was it coming from? And why was it there?
Yeah. So how would you want to be part of that kind of hostile environment?
Yeah, it was a hard, but the engagement was great with the people that I met, and they just kept saying, don't give up. Like you're listening. We're glad you're listening. I was able to reach out to council, or at least to the staff, my running for the 4 years before that, plus my involvement with the community. And I guess having Terry Fox behind me kind of gave some, benefit.
You started attending meetings too at some point, right?
Yeah, we did. We started going to the meetings again.
Was that before your first run or after the first run?
In between, during the 14, as well as during the current one. So I had kind of kept going so I could see how things were and how they ran. Again, disheartening, like 15, 20-minute council meetings.
I know. I remember hearing about that. And I'm in North Dumfries and we're like 3-4 hours and I'm going, I don't understand how that happens.
I didn't understand it either because nothing was talked about. It was the weirdest feeling. Again, that sort of disrespect for the residents. It just felt that nobody cared. Right. And and look and that's how you're processing it, and that's how you're feeling, and you're obviously hearing from other people who are processing that the same way. So I mean, if you were an anomaly, no one would ask you to run, right? Correct.
So now we're coming up on 2018. Yep. And you file. How did the incumbent decide not to run, or what happened there?
Yeah, I think Peter decided not to run, like I think 3 or 4 days before he made an official announcement that he was going to retire.
Oh, okay.
So, I'm not sure why that might have had an impact on other people. Maybe they just thought it was going to be Peter and I, maybe because of the new rules of having the 25 signatures. But it left me with nobody running against me, even though there was talk through the community that there was going to be some people running. Maybe they just thought they weren't going to run against Peter and myself. I don't know. Like I have no idea why nobody decided, but at the end of it, I ended up being acclaimed.
Yeah. So congratulations on that.
Yeah. It was kind of weird. I didn't particularly like it, but that's the way that
it is what it is. You didn't choose that. It's just how it is. Take it. I mean, it's fun. Okay. I always, it's like in tennis, when you watch tennis and the ball happens to just hit the top of the net and fall in, and the other guy or girl puts their hand up to apologize. And I think, well, it's just the way it is. What are you apologizing for? Yeah, exactly. So you got it claimed. And, obviously people were happy that your name was there because no one else put it in. So, they're confident in you, and that's an affirmation. So
thank you.
And I guess, fortunately for you too, you got elected with Angie and Jen, right? I mean,
oh yes, my fellow angels.
Yeah, because we had. Okay, how did the iconic photo come about?
The one with us with Kim Campbell.
Yes.
Yeah. So what had happened was, it really had to do with the fact that she was the first female, and we were the first in 44 years. So that putting up of the statue of hers was to celebrate 25 years of since she had been elected, and unfortunately the only female that we've elected or had in place, because she wasn't really elected, but in place as prime minister.
Prime minister, yes.
Yeah, correct, yes. And so it just kind of felt like the thing to do was that Wilmot it took 44 years. And we had parity, which we had never had before, unless you consider six men.
Right away. I know.
Yeah.
Parity right off the bat. It was fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah. So we had parity, and we had for the first time in 44 years. So and the statue, I think, had only been up like less than 6 months. So it was really just kind of felt the right thing to do.
Yeah. It was a great picture. Great picture.
Yeah,
I loved it.
We really liked it.
I loved it.
Yeah. We were very fortunate. Nige actually reached out to Kim. Miss Campbell. And normally she doesn't give autographs or anything like that, but because of the situation, she actually autographed all three of our portraits. Nigel got them done for us as a gift and had them framed for the three of us. So yeah, it's kind of cool.
That Nige, he's
I know. He's
very
amazing.
Very thoughtful person. So what was so you'd been going to council meetings, so you had, some experience from observing all of that, getting in.
Yeah.
How did you feel the learning curve for you in terms of moving from community volunteer to now a counselor? How did you find that process?
It was a little difficult.
Oh, you're.
Sorry, Rob. It's trying to be kind.
I know. I can see that.
So it was not easy. We were being led down a path that certain individuals in our community at the township wanted us to be led down. Thankfully, the three of us were independent enough and savvy enough to go on our own and figure some things out. So we actually paid for council training.
Yeah, it's very smart. So here's the thing, and you raised a very interesting point. I had a great podcast with Mike Murray, who was the CAO at the Regional Waterloo. Okay, and he was there when I was on regional council there back in 2010 to 2014, and we just did a whole we were going to talk about some other stuff, but we just got into this discussion about the staff politician dynamic. And it was a great conversation. So we just spent the whole hour talking about that. And that is the interesting situation there, because you're out there campaigning, you're running on a platform, you're hearing from people about issues they're concerned about, and every candidate's doing their own individual thing, because there's no party, there's no common platform.
Correct.
Now you come together and you're on a council where you've got some incumbents who've been there for a while. So they've been doing things for 4 or 8 or 12 years. Yeah. And you've got staff that's been there the whole time. And they're working on plans that were developed and approved with prior council that continue on because they got master plans and everything else. Correct. And now you're trying to find your role in all of that. And how do I accomplish some things that I'd like to do within a 4-year period?
Correct.
Very, very difficult. A lot of people don't realize.
Yeah, and it wasn't so much. It wasn't so much that we didn't understand the stuff about the capital plans, like the 10-year forecast, which I'm really thankful that Wilmot is one of the few that has something like that. The master plans, pretty much a lot of them are good documents, and they're living documents that continually can change, of course, with budget, right? Like they're not inexpensive to do, but they're not set in stone. They can change. Where I found that the biggest impetus was the following the rules, so to speak, right? Because they had a set way. So Robert's rules, they would tell us, well, we'll follow Robert rules. Well, Angie, aka Binder Lady, follows Robert's rules, as does Jen, who's been on numerous boards, and currently now is president of the NFU. They know what they're doing and have done it for numerous times. And so when we would bring out the Robert Rule book, the 3 men did not expect us to kind of know our stuff. But we had, like I said, we had paid for our own training at AMO to become better counselors. When you say
AMO, it's AMO, which is, was it
the Association of Municipal
Municipalities of Ontario or something like that?
Municipalities of Ontario, yeah. And we paid for that out of our own pocket. And we went for the weekend training, and they went through the most of the municipal code, what we're responsible for, talking about integrity commissioner complaints, like just our bylaws, even something as simple as changing shall, which had changed in 2018 to become may. Our bylaws had not been redone, I think, in Wilmot Township since 1997. So some of them are actually out of weren't even legal.
Yeah. So as a lawyer, I can tell you shall versus will or may has a totally different meaning or connotation. But you raise a great point, is that everybody the municipality should pay to send, especially new people, to a course like that. That is so essential, because everyone just assumes, the rules, the policies and procedures, the conflict of interest guidelines. Like you said, the Robert's Rules of Order, which are in addition to whatever policies and procedures, the code of conduct, even how to do a budget. Those things are all foreign to people who just show up, and it is overwhelming, absolutely overwhelming. Yeah,
and we weren't getting that direction from our upper management. They almost felt, again, perspective, it intentionally felt that they were misleading us so that we wouldn't be the people that we are. I think they wanted us to do what the previous council had done and gone back to 15-minute council meetings. And we were like, we're going to talk about these. We have people now who voted us in who want us to do our job. And so one of the things that people did was they phoned us. We got emails, we got phone calls. Could you talk to them about this? Could you ask this question? And our staff did not like us asking those questions. Our fellow councillors did not like us asking those questions. And they sure as heck did not like being there for our 1 to 2 hour council meetings so that we could talk about those
Were they giving you the old, you could ask those questions some other time and not do it during the council meeting? No.
And so one of the things that, and I mean, to a certain extent, there is a bit of going back and forth respect. So one of the things that, we eventually found out, and to be honest, to be fair to the staff, is sometimes they need to be looked at and dug into to find those answers. So we did get to a point where we would say to them, or we would send them an email, we want to find out a little bit more about this. I'm going to ask this question. And so I'm giving you, the 2 days or 3 days notice to kind of at least have,
totally
which is fair, because they don't want to be, looking like idiots, and we don't want our staff to look like idiots.
No, nobody wants to challenge anybody. It's just everyone's working for one purpose, to help the public.
Correct.
So
we eventually did that. Yeah. But at the beginning, it was kind of like, well, wait a second. I want to ask that question. And it was kind of weird because at first we didn't kind of do that. And I think part of it had to do with just they weren't answering us. So it kind of felt like a little bit of they were trying to put roadblocks up. And then eventually it got to a joint, well, okay, now I understand. So we would ask those questions, but a lot of them were from our residents. Well, why are you doing this? Or why aren't you doing that? Or whatever.
I think the interesting thing here is because Angie talked to us about the land acknowledgement process that went on with that. And I remember chatting with her way back when she was looking into that and talking about, how to make something like that happen. And to Wilmot's credit, as I said to Angie, you were the first in the region, and now it took
a lot of work though.
Yeah. No, I totally understand. Yeah. We talked about that. And I think what's good is that, it's okay to butt heads a little bit, because out of that comes, you developed a process, a procedure to deal with these questions. Like you said, you would give them a heads up so that they could give you an answer. And I'm sure if they didn't have the answer yet, fine, give me a timeline when you think you can get back to me on that, right? So then you can get back to the people that are asking you.
Correct. Yeah. And it's interesting because a lot of times sometimes they were valid responses. Like, we don't know the answer to that. Other times it felt like they didn't want to answer. So it would just continually be put off. So eventually it became a game sometimes, right? Oh, well, and then we got to the point where we'd say, well, can you please give me a time? Because I'm going to diarize that. I would like to know when you're going to be able to answer that question for me. And I will ask it at the next council meeting that you give me the time frame for. And so we would have to diarize stuff, because if we didn't, they would well, it got forgotten about, right?
Well,
and
you
so
know
those
what?
questions, yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
No.
in business, you do the same thing.
Yeah.
If I run a law practice, I have staff. If I need an answer to something, I'll set a time by when I need that answer by. I mean, there's nothing wrong with applying that basic, fundamental, good management practice to what you're doing in the public realm from the private realm. But it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, the work in politics is so public.
Yes.
Right? You have your private business. No one sees anything. But in politics, everybody sees everything.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. It is. And I think that was I think that I'm one of the things and I believe probably Jen and Angie are the most proudest of is because we actually opened that door for people to kind of have that conversation, to kind of get their questions asked, even if they were silly questions, like why, like one of the biggest a big issue that came up, and it was like a group of residents wanted to put a butterfly garden in a piece of property that the township owned.
Right.
And right off the bat, they said no. They didn't give us a reason. They just said no. And we're like, it's a butterfly garden.
Let me ask you first, how did that request come in? Was it through a counselor or they went straight to staff?
No, it went to the counselor because actually it did go to staff at one time, but the staff turned it down. So they went to the counselor to sort of say, what can you do and why? Because I'm not getting a response. And that tended to be a lot of what happened is that they would follow the rules. Like, like we got a pothole. So they would go through the township, or we've got a tree that's down, they go through the township. But sometimes those responses didn't get answered. And so they would come to us then. And one of the us that they came to was for the butterfly garden. Another was for lighted stop signs for our crossing guards. They fought us on that. There was a lot that they fought us on. And it felt like they'd rather say no than to, I don't know. And let's look into it.
Now, and I always say to people, like, okay, staff may have some limitations because they have to follow certain parameters and guidelines, and that's understood. But I always say to people, if you get a no from staff, then come and see a counselor. It doesn't mean it's you're being treated wrongly, but come to counsel, because people don't realize counselors are the ones that vote. You have the legal authority. You have the power. You can create bylaws. You can change anything you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
As long as the majority. As long as the majority agrees, right? Okay, so just on the butterfly, what happened? What happened?
Well, eventually it went there, but it didn't come to vote because it happened without us being involved. But it came to council the first time for us to have the conversation. Yeah. And but I think they got it just ended up happening. But the part that was bad about it was that we were taken out of the conversation almost again. It felt like intentionally.
Okay, hold on a sec. So first they went to staff. Staff said no. Correct. Then they came to council. Correct. And then staff said, well, maybe we can do something.
No, they said no. And then again to us as council. Yeah. And then we said, but why? Mm-hmm. And they said it had to do with insurance, which again, they couldn't justify that. Okay. And then somewhere along the line, without it even coming back to council, a butterfly garden just appeared.
Well, but who authorized it?
We don't know. We never found out.
I think you just tell me Mother Nature, the butterflies just showed up.
Yeah, they just showed up. Yeah, it was weird.
But some work was done.
Yeah, it got done. But it's weird how it happened, right? Like it just felt like antagonizing, antagonistic.
A commando butterfly garden contingent from the community?
It very well might have been. I don't know. It just kind of appeared, and we just kind of like, oh well, at least it's there.
It's done.
We don't need to take the wins. It wasn't about the wins. It was about just getting listening, done. Right?
Yeah. And I think that's so important is the listening, because that's what got me elected back in 2010. It was the perception that people aren't listening to what it is you needed. Now, obviously, some people are getting listened to, but I guess the goal is to try to expand that so that more people feel like they're being listened to.
Well, and again, back to what I'm most proud of is what the three of us were able to accomplish is we were changing some of the things that happened. We had open meetings, not open meetings, but we had budget sessions for people to come and attend. And, staff were nobody comes, nobody cares. I'm like, but how do you know? Things change. Different people are moving to Wilmot. There are people that are more engaged. Why can't we have? So we started having a bit more, unfortunately, during our time, the 2 years of COVID. But for the first 2 years, we were slowly making changes that we could have open sessions for people to come and talk about the budget, look what's involved, see how it works, have some questions, and have staff there. The unfortunate part is like maybe 5 or 6 people came out of the whole township. So it wasn't great numbers, but it was a start, right?
Exactly. It's a start. And I think the bigger point is whatever the numbers are, people are aware that you're open to having the conversations, that you're providing the opportunities on different levels. Because, there's more social media engagement that's happening as well. But to actually have physical public meetings is just showing that you're there, open to changing the way. It's not the same old.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, is that people, like you said, they want to be heard. And that was, we asked for those things to happen. We asked for Facebook to be put on. We didn't want it to be a place for people to come in and make it like a rabbit hole of going down an issue. But for those, Wilmot is known for having a large senior population between Foxborough Green, Morningside, a few of the other residents here, Nithview.
Yes.
And our older residents are Facebookers, whether or not they are engaged, but at least they're Facebook. They may not be on Twitter. And it tends to be that your age fits a certain social media. So we said, could we have at least Twitter and Facebook so we can at least reach the demographics? We don't need to go onto TikTok or any of those things, but information-wise, our demographics are Facebook and Twitter for the time being. Can we have a communications person? And again, it was another fight about having Facebook. It took us like over a year for us to get a Facebook page, which is like nothing. It was just tell us where you can go to get taxes paid, put up a notice about, an event happening. Yeah, it was just,
Well,
anyway.
Okay, listen, Cheryl, struggles and being heard, but on the theme of being heard, we're going to have you back for another show to talk about some of the actual things that were done during your time in office. Okay. But listen, I want to thank you, because I think the conversation today was very informative, talking about that dynamic, that staff elected person dynamic and some of the things, and also getting a better perspective on what you all were going through and dealing with, and the work you did to try and improve that two-way flow of communication and information between council and the community. So thanks for coming on the show.
It was great. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Rob. It was fun, actually.
Great. That's key for me, that somebody comes away with thinking it was fun versus torture.
It's always great to kind of go back and have some of those nice memories. It wasn't all like, even though the last little bit, some contentious issues, but it was great. Yeah, it was good.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, Cheryl, thanks a lot. You take care. Say hi to Nige. Say hi to Nige for me. Okay, bye.